Imagine waking up one morning to the sound of laughter and smoke filling the air, only to realize that the very animals you've raised, cared for, and loved like family have been stolen from your own backyard. That's exactly what happened to me when two entitled Karen sisters decided they had the right to snatch my baby sheep for their backyard barbecue. I could barely believe it at first. Who would do something so cruel and heartless? But when I followed the sound of their loud music and arrogant voices, I saw the unthinkable. My poor sheep tied up, ready to be roasted, as if it was just some random piece of meat from the store. My blood boiled. The Karens laughed in my face when I demanded my sheep back. They acted like it was their right because the sheep had wandered close to their yard, which was a lie. My sheep was stolen, plain and simple. Their smug grins, the smell of smoke, and the sight of my frightened animal nearly broke me. But I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I decided in that moment that this wasn't just about one sheep. It was about standing up to selfish bullies who thought they could trample over anyone for their own entertainment. What they didn't expect was that I wasn't going to fight them alone. I called in the one power that terrifies every Karen more than anything else, the cops. And when the flashing blue and red lights rolled up to their little party, their laughter died instantly. What came next was the most satisfying revenge I've ever experienced. The morning began like any other, quiet and peaceful. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold, and the gentle hum of the countryside made me feel calm. I stepped out of my house with a warm cup of coffee in one hand and my boots crunching against the gravel path that led to the animal pens. It was part of my daily ritual: check on the animals, make sure they were fed and safe, and spend a few moments enjoying the simple life I had chosen. For me, my animals weren't just livestock, they were family. I started with the chickens, tossing feed and watching them scramble with happy clucks. Then I moved to the goats, who always greeted me with excited bleats, nudging my legs for treats. Everything seemed perfectly normal until I reached the sheep pen. That's when the calmness of my morning shattered. I stopped dead in my tracks. Something wasn't right. There should have been 3 little sheep waiting for me, pushing at the fence in their usual eager way. But instead, there were only 2. I blinked, counted again, then felt my stomach drop. One of my baby sheep, Snowball, the smallest and most affectionate one, was missing. At first, I thought maybe she had slipped through a gap in the fence, though I couldn't imagine how. I rushed forward, inspecting every corner of the pen. The wooden boards were sturdy, the wire mesh secure. No holes, no broken posts, nothing that could have allowed her to escape. Panic started to creep in. I called out her name, though I knew she wouldn't come running like a dog. Still, I hoped maybe she was nearby. Grazing close to the property, I hurried out to the back field, scanning the tall grass, searching under trees, listening for the faint bleat of a lost lamb. But the land was quiet, too quiet. My heart began to pound. Sheep don't just vanish into thin air, and Snowball had never wandered far from her siblings before. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. That's when I caught it. The faint sound of laughter carried on the breeze. It came from the direction of my neighbor's property, the Karen sisters. My heart tightened. The sisters had always been troubled. They weren't just difficult neighbors. They thrived on drama and entitlement. Every little thing turned into a fight with them, whether it was a misplaced trash bin, a few leaves falling from my trees into their yard, or even the sound of my rooster crowing in the morning. They had a reputation around town for causing scenes wherever they went, and people often avoided them just to keep the peace. The laughter grew louder, and then I smelled its smoke. Not the comforting scent of a fireplace, but the sharp smell of a grill being fired up. My stomach twisted into knots as a dark thought crossed my mind. No, I told myself, it couldn't be. Nobody would do something that cruel. Nobody would steal a baby sheep to use in a barbecue. And yet, with every step I took toward their house, dread clamped down on me harder. I left the field and walked quickly down the narrow dirt path that separated our properties. The closer I got, the clearer the sounds became: music thumping, people talking, and the shrill laughter of the Karen sisters. My chest tightened as I turned the corner of their yard and saw the scene with my own eyes. There, in their backyard, with balloons tied to chairs and a table stacked with drinks, was a party in full swing. Guests milled about, holding plates, and in the center of it all stood the Karen sisters, grinning and flipping burgers on the grill. But it wasn't the food on the grill that made my heart freeze. It was what I saw just a few feet away. Snowball, my Snowball. She was tied up near their patio, bleating in fear, pulling against the rope as if she knew what fate awaited her. My mouth went dry. For a moment, I couldn't even move. Rage, disbelief, and horror all hit me at once. They had actually stolen her. They hadn't just taken a sheep, they had taken part of my family. My hands shook as I stormed into their yard, my voice louder than I'd ever heard it. What do you think you're doing? That's my sheep. The sisters turned to look at me, their smug smiles never fading. The older one, who always acted like she was queen of the neighborhood, raised her eyebrows and laughed. Oh, this little thing. She wandered into our yard. We figured it was a sign. Perfect timing for our barbecue. She did not wander anywhere. I snapped, pointing at the rope around Snowball's neck. You stole her. Untie her right now. Instead of apologizing, they laughed even harder. Their friends joined in too. smirking as if it was all one big joke. The younger sister sipped her drink and said, "Relax, it's just a sheep. You've got more, don't you? Why are you making such a big deal out of one?" Her words made my blood boil. To them, Snowball was nothing more than meat for their grill. To me, she was a living, breathing creature who trusted me to keep her safe. The audacity, the arrogance, the utter heartlessness, it was like a slap in the face. I tried reasoning with them, though my voice shook with anger. "That sheep is mine. She's registered. I have the papers to prove it. You can't just take someone's animal and decide to kill it for your party. This is theft. It's cruelty," the older sister sneered, putting her hands on her hips. "Don't get so dramatic. It's not like we heard it yet. Besides, you should be thanking us. We're saving you the trouble of raising it. Honestly, you farmers are too sensitive about animals." The crowd laughed again, and I felt like I was surrounded by hyenas. Snowball bleated desperately, and I knew standing there arguing wasn't going to save her. My throat tightened, my fists clenched, and for a moment I considered untying her myself and dragging her home. But the thought of the sisters and their guests blocking me, mocking me, maybe even hurting me, stopped me cold. I realized something important right then. Karens don't listen to reason. They don't care about decency or respect. The only thing they understand is when someone with more power steps in. My heart raced as I backed away from their yard, their laughter echoing behind me like nails on a chalkboard. I whispered to Snowball under my breath as I left, "Hang on, girl. I'm going to get you out of this." I walked back toward my house, my mind already spinning with what I needed to do. This wasn't just about a stolen sheep anymore. This was about standing up to two selfish bullies who thought they could take whatever they wanted, and I was about to make sure they learned just how wrong they were. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anger and disbelief. My mind kept replaying the image of Snowball tied up in the Karen sisters' yard, struggling against the rope while those women laughed and mocked me. Every time I thought about it, my fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. I tried to distract myself, feeding the other animals, checking the fences, even washing dishes. But no matter what I did, Snowball's terrified bleat echoed in my ears. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to face them again. This time not just as a pleading neighbor, but as someone ready to fight for what was right. Snowball wasn't just livestock, she was part of my life, part of my heart, and those two entitled women thought they could treat her like a party decoration. Before throwing her on the grill, as the afternoon sun sank lower, I could hear the party at their house growing louder. The bass of the music thudded through the walls of my home, rattling my windows. People shouted and laughed as if nothing in the world mattered except their little gathering. I marched out of my front door, determination burning inside me when I reached their backyard. The sight hadn't changed much from earlier. The Karen sisters were still the center of attention, holding drinks, laughing, and playing host to their group of friends. The grill smoked heavily, and the smell of charred meat clung to the air. But what hit me hardest was Snowball, still tied up, still frightened, her fleece stained with dirt from struggling. I stormed right up to them, my voice louder than the music. "Enough. Untie her right now." The older sister, whose smug face I had come to despise, turned with a dramatic sigh, as if I were interrupting her royal banquet. "Oh, it's you again. Don't you get tired of whining?" Her younger sister leaned on the grill with a smirk. "Seriously, it's just a sheep. We're not exactly stealing your firstborn." The crowd around them chuckled, and my cheeks burned with fury. "That sheep belongs to me. She has a tag. She's registered, and I have proof. You are committing theft and animal cruelty." The older sister tilted her head, her blonde hair falling dramatically over her shoulder. "Animal cruelty, please. Look at her, she's fine. She's not hurt. You farmers overreact to everything. Honestly, you should be grateful. We're giving her a better use than just standing around chewing grass." Snowball bleated again, pulling against the rope, and the sound cut through my heart. I took a step forward, but immediately two men from the party moved closer, crossing their arms as if daring me to try. I glared at them, but I knew I couldn't get into a physical fight. That was exactly what the Karens would want, a chance to twist the story and make me look like the villain. "You don't get to decide the fate of what doesn't belong to you," I said firmly, forcing myself to stay calm even though rage boiled inside me. "Untie her, or you'll regret it." The younger sister laughed so hard she almost spilled her drink. "Oh, listen to him trying to sound scary. What are you going to do? Write us a strongly worded letter?" Her friends howled with laughter. The sound made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, to shake them, to make them understand this wasn't a joke. This was my animal, my responsibility, my family. But instead, I looked straight into their smug faces and said, "You think you're untouchable, don't you? What, you think you can take whatever you want, mock whoever you want, and get away with it? But you're wrong. You're going to pay for this." The older sister rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. We've lived here for years. Everyone knows us. Nobody's going to take your side over ours. We're respected in this community." That was a blatant lie. The truth was everyone in the community avoided them like the plague, but their arrogance blinded them to reality. They believed they were invincible, and that belief fueled their behavior. Snowball bleated again, and I clenched my jaw. I could feel the heat of the grill, smell the burning charcoal. and see the hungry stares of their guests who clearly thought it would be fun to eat a stolen animal. My blood ran cold. "This isn't over," I said in a low voice. "You think you can humiliate me, but I promise you, you'll regret every second of this." The younger sister waved her hand dismissively. "Whatever, don't let the gate hit you on the way out. We've got guests to entertain." The older one smirked and added, "Maybe if you're lucky, we'll save you a piece." Their laughter roared as I turned away, but I didn't respond. I walked back toward my house, every step heavy with fury and resolve. Behind me, the music blared again. The laughter picked up, and the smell of smoke filled the air. They thought they had one. They thought I would just crawl away defeated, but they had underestimated me by the time I reached my front porch. I knew exactly what I had to do. Arguing with them was pointless. They lived in their own delusional world where rules didn't apply to them. The only way to stop them was to bring in someone they couldn't argue with, someone they couldn't intimidate or mock into silence. The police. I sat down at my kitchen table, my hands shaking as I reached for my phone. For a moment, I hesitated. Calling the police felt like a big step, but then I remembered Snowball's frightened eyes. I remembered the rope digging into her neck and the Karen's cruel laughter, and I knew this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. This was theft. This was cruelty. This was something no decent person could ignore. I dialed the number with trembling fingers, my voice steady as I explained the situation. "My neighbors have stolen one of my sheep. They're holding it tied up at a barbecue. I have proof it's mine. Please, you have to help before they do something to it." The dispatcher assured me officers were on their way. Relief washed over me, mixed with a burning anticipation. For the first time that day, I felt like justice might actually be possible as I hung up the phone. I looked out the window toward their backyard. The lights, the smoke, the laughter, all of it seemed to mock me. But I smiled faintly. Let them laugh. Let them celebrate. They had no idea what was coming. Snowball was coming home, and the Karens were about to get the shock of their lives. The evening crept in, and though the sun dipped below the horizon, the Karen sisters' backyard shone like a carnival. Strings of lights glowed across their fence, music thumped louder than ever, and voices carried over the fields with irritating sharpness. From my porch, I could see flashes of people dancing, waving drinks, and laughing as though they had the right to disturb the entire neighborhood, but none of that mattered compared to the sight that haunted me. Even from a distance, I could spot Snowball tied near the patio, her small body shifting nervously, rope digging into her neck. Every bleat carried across the evening air like a cry for help, stabbing me deeper than I could stand. My other animals stirred restlessly, unsettled by the noise and, perhaps, sensing my agitation. I had already called the police, but waiting wasn't easy. Every minute stretched out painfully, and I couldn't stop imagining the worst, that the Karens would decide to hurry things along and end Snowball's life before the officers arrived. The thought made my heart race and my stomach twist. I couldn't just sit inside. I needed to confront them one last time, even if it meant facing their cruel laughter again. So I stepped into the night, walking the now familiar path toward their yard, each step heavy with anger and determination. As I drew closer, the music grew deafening. Someone had turned up the volume, and the bass vibrated in my chest. I pushed through their open gate, and just like before, heads turned. Conversations paused for a moment as I marched across the yard, eyes fixed on Snowball. She pulled against the rope as soon as she saw me, bleating desperately, as if she knew I was her only hope. "Get away from her," I shouted, my voice cutting through the music. The older sister was the first to react. Her ever-present smug grin plastered across her face. "Oh, look who's back. Can't stay away from the party, huh?" The younger one leaned lazily against the grill, waving a beer can. "I told you he'd come crawling back. He's obsessed with that sheep." Their guests burst into laughter, some of them pointing at me, others whispering loudly enough for me to hear. "What's the big deal?" One woman said. "It's just food." Another man chimed in. "You should be thanking them. Free dinner." Their mockery was like gasoline thrown on the fire already burning inside me. My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. But I forced myself not to react physically. That was what they wanted, to provoke me, to make me lose control so they could spin the story against me. I couldn't give them that satisfaction. "Untie her," I said firmly, pointing at Snowball. "Right now." The older sister rolled her eyes dramatically. "You just don't get it, do you? She wandered here. She's ours now. That's how it works. Finders keepers." "That's not how it works," I shot back. "That's theft. That's cruelty. She doesn't belong to you and you know it." The younger sister smirked, tossing her empty can onto the ground. "Oh, boo-hoo. Go cry somewhere else. Nobody here cares about your little farm animal." She turned to her guests, raising her arms like a performer on stage. "Seriously, everyone, does this guy look crazy or what?" The crowd cheered and laughed again, their cruelty blending into one awful chorus. Some even pulled out their phones, recording the scene like I was some kind of spectacle for their entertainment. My jaw tightened. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Snowball bleated again, pulling at the rope until her legs wobbled. The sight nearly broke me. I wanted to rush forward, to untie her and run, but two men from the party stepped closer, blocking my path. Their broad shoulders and smug looks told me everything. They were there to intimidate me, to keep me from interfering. I met their eyes, holding my ground. You're all making a huge mistake. This isn't a joke. When the police get here, every one of you will regret being part of this. The older sister let out a loud, mocking laugh. Police, oh please. We know half the cops in town. They're not going to take your side over ours. You think anyone believes a farmer over us? Her arrogance was staggering. She really thought she was untouchable, shielded by her false reputation. But I knew better. The truth was on my side, and I had the evidence to prove it. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. I've got photos of Snowball, vet records, even witnesses who saw you drag her from my yard. You can lie all you want, but the evidence doesn't lie. And when the cops show up, you'll see exactly how much your reputation is worth. The younger sister scoffed. Big talk. Too bad you don't scare us. Her words sparked another round of laughter from the guests, but beneath their noise I caught something else, a flicker of unease in her eyes. For the first time, I realized they weren't completely confident. They had power in numbers now, backed by their audience, but deep down they knew what they'd done was wrong. I straightened, my voice calm but firm. This is the last time I'll ask you. Untie her. The older sister smirked, folding her arms. Or what, you'll sue us? You'll send a mean letter to the homeowners association. I didn't answer. I simply looked at Snowball, then back at them, and repeated, this isn't over. One way or another, she's coming home. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then, as if on cue, the younger sister clapped her hands, and the music blared louder again. Party's over for you, farmer boy. Go home before you embarrass yourself even more. The laughter picked up again, and I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere by standing there. If I tried to take Snowball now, it would turn into a fight, and that was exactly what they wanted. So I turned on my heel, ignoring their jeers, and walked out of the yard. Every step away from them was like swallowing fire. Their laughter followed me down the path, echoing in my ears, but I forced myself to keep moving. I had done everything I could for now. The rest would be in the hands of the people who could truly hold them accountable. As I reached my porch again, my phone buzzed. It was a call from the police dispatcher. Officers were on their way. Relief surged through me, washing away some of the anger. Soon, very soon, the balance would shift. The Karens had mocked me, belittled me, and tried to humiliate me in front of their friends. But when those flashing lights appeared in their driveway, all their arrogance would crumble. I looked out toward their yard one more time, the glow of their lights flickering like a challenge. Snowball's faint bleat drifted across the night air, and I whispered softly, hold on, girl, just a little longer, help is coming. And with that, I waited, burning with fury, but steady in my resolve. The Karens had no idea that the fun they were so proud of was about to end in the most humiliating way possible. The minutes after my call to the dispatcher felt like hours. I paced the kitchen, then the porch, then back again, unable to sit still. My mind kept running through the scene in their backyard. Snowball's frightened eyes, the rope digging into her neck, the smug smirks of the Karen sisters as they paraded around with stolen confidence. The longer I waited, the more anxious I became that they might decide to act faster, to end Snowball's life before help arrived. Then, just as I felt I couldn't take another second, the sound of sirens pierced the night. The wail grew louder, accompanied by the faint flash of red and blue reflecting off windows and fences. My heart leapt into my throat. The cavalry had arrived. I rushed outside, standing at the edge of my driveway as the patrol car pulled up. The officers stepped out, their presence steady and calm, their uniforms a symbol of authority that no amount of Karen arrogance could brush aside. The taller one, with a trimmed beard and serious eyes, walked toward me first. You're the one who called? He asked, his tone direct but not unfriendly. Yes, I said quickly. They stole one of my sheep from its pen earlier today. I saw it in their backyard, tied up, and they admitted they planned to use it for their barbecue. The second officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a notebook in hand, nodded. Do you have proof the sheep belongs to you? Yes, photos, vet records, even neighbors who saw them drag her away. My voice trembled slightly, but I steadied it. She's tied up right now, in their yard. If you hurry, you'll see for yourself. The officers exchanged a glance, then the man gestured. All right, let's go take a look. I walked with him down the narrow path toward the Karen sisters' property. My pulse raced, half from anger, half from relief. For the first time all day, I felt the weight of justice shift in my direction. As we neared the backyard, the music blared louder. The guests were still laughing, drinking, oblivious to the flashing lights outside their gate. But the moment the officers stepped into the yard, everything changed. The music cut abruptly, conversations died mid-sentence, and a ripple of unease spread through the crowd. The older Karen spotted the uniforms first. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she plastered on her signature smirk. Oh, officers, what a surprise. We weren't expecting company. The younger one, less composed, blurted, what's this about? But her voice cracked just slightly. The taller officer didn't waste time. He pointed toward Snowball, who bleated desperately as soon as she saw me. That animal doesn't belong to you. The older sister laughed, high-pitched and fake. Of course, she wandered into our yard earlier. We thought it was fate. We're just keeping her safe. Safe, I snapped, unable to hold back. You tied her up like a trophy for your party. She's my sheep, and you know it. The officer raised a hand, calming me, then turned back to the sisters. Do you have any proof that this animal is yours? The youngest sister scoffed, tossing her hair. Why would we need proof? She came here on her own. Everyone saw it. She gestured vaguely toward the crowd, but the guests suddenly seemed less eager to participate. A few shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. The female officer pulled out her notebook. Sir, do you have the documentation you mentioned? Yes, I said quickly. I handed her the folder I'd brought, photos of Snowball with her distinctive markings, vet records with her tag number, even a bill of sale from when I'd bought her. She's registered, she's mine, and neighbors saw them dragging her out of my yard earlier. The officers studied the documents carefully. The taller one compared the photos to Snowball, who was now pulling at the rope again, her bleats desperate. It was clear to anyone with eyes she was the same sheep. The older Karen's confident smirk faltered. Those papers don't prove anything. Anyone could fake those. Fake, I snapped. Go ahead and check with the vet listed on those records. You'll see the truth. The officers didn't answer her directly. Instead, the female officer jotted something in her notebook before turning to the sisters. We're going to need you to untie the animal immediately. The younger Karen's face twisted in outrage. What, you can't just barge into our yard and take what's ours? The taller officer's tone hardened. Ma'am, this is not yours. The documentation is clear, and theft of livestock is a serious offense. Untie the animal. Now the older sister tried one last time, her voice dripping with false innocence. Officers, please. This is a misunderstanding. We were only looking after her until now, the officer repeated sharply. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. The sisters exchanged glances, their arrogance crumbling under the weight of authority. Finally, with a dramatic sigh, the older one marched toward Snowball and tugged at the knot. Snowball bleated loudly, then bolted toward me the moment she was free, pressing against my legs as if she knew she was safe again. Relief flooded through me, so strong it nearly brought tears to my eyes. The officers weren't finished. We'll need statements from all parties, the female officer said firmly, turning to the sisters. And given the circumstances, you may be facing charges of theft and animal cruelty. The younger Karen shrieked. This is ridiculous. We were just having a party. The taller officer's eyes narrowed. A party doesn't excuse stealing. You're lucky we arrived before anything worse happened. Their guests, once rowdy and bold, were now silent, shifting uncomfortably. A few quietly set down their drinks, edging toward the gate as if they wanted no part of what was happening. The energy of the party had evaporated, replaced by a suffocating tension. I stroked Snowball's fleece, murmuring to her softly as the officers continued. For the first time that day, I felt like the nightmare was ending. Justice was no longer just a hope, it was unfolding right before my eyes. The older sister tried again, her voice brittle. You can't fine us for this. We didn't mean any harm. The female officer gave her a cold stare. Intent doesn't erase actions. You took what wasn't yours, restrained it, and planned to harm it. That's more than enough for consequences. The words hung in the air like a final verdict. The sisters had no comeback. Their smirks were gone, replaced by pale faces and clenched jaws. Their arrogance, their mockery, their entitlement, it had all collapsed under the weight of the truth. As I led Snowball gently back toward my property, her little hooves tapping against the dirt path, I didn't look back at the Karens. I didn't need to. Their silence told me everything. The party was over. The night air was cool as I guided Snowball back into her pen. The rope that once bound her now coiled harmlessly in my hands. She pressed against my leg, still nervous but slowly calming as she reunited with her siblings. They greeted her with soft bleats, circling around her as though they knew she had endured something frightening. I crouched beside her, rubbing her soft fleece, whispering, "You're safe now, girl. You're home." The relief washed over me like a tidal wave. For hours I'd been trapped in anger, disbelief, and helplessness, but now Snowball was back where she belonged. My chest loosened for the first time that day. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. The Karens had caused chaos, mocked me in front of a crowd, and nearly destroyed a piece of my family. They weren't going to walk away from this without consequences. Behind me, the police officers continued their work. Flashing red and blue lights bathed the Karen sisters' yard in harsh color, and their once cheerful party looked more like a crime scene. Guests scattered, slipping away through the gate with hurried excuses, unwilling to be part of the mess any longer. The sisters, however, stood stiffly by the officers, their arms folded, their faces twisted with anger and humiliation. The taller officer addressed them sternly. "You're being cited for theft of livestock and animal cruelty. You'll be required to appear in court, and fines will be imposed. Consider yourselves lucky this isn't worse." The younger Karen exploded. "This is insane. We didn't do anything wrong. That sheep walked here." The female officer snapped her notebook shut. "Enough. The documentation is clear. Witnesses are available, and your own behavior speaks volumes. This isn't up for debate." The older sister, usually the queen of arrogance, stood silent, her face pale and lips pressed into a thin line. She knew there was no way out. Their reign of mockery had crumbled in a single evening. I stayed quiet, watching from a short distance. There was a deep satisfaction in seeing their arrogance deflate under the weight of real authority. For so long, the Karen sisters had thrived on intimidation, manipulation, and noise. But the flashing lights, the uniformed officers, and the written citations stripped all of that power away. They weren't invincible anymore. Snowball nuzzled my arm as I straightened, and I smiled faintly. "You see that?" I murmured to her. "Justice." The officers eventually left with the citations filed and court dates set. The Karens slinked back into their now empty yard, their decorations drooping, their music silenced, their pride shattered. Not a single guest remained. The sisters had wanted to host the event of the season, a big loud party that proved how untouchable they were. Instead, they ended the night humiliated, their names tied to theft and cruelty in official reports. Over the following days, the story spread. Neighbors who had once tiptoed around the Karens finally spoke up, recounting years of bullying, petty complaints, and entitled behavior. The sheep incident became the breaking point. For once, the community wasn't rolling their eyes and moving on. They were furious at the local feed store. Someone patted me on the shoulder and said, "Heard about what happened. Glad you stood up to them. It's about time." Others shared similar words of encouragement. And I realized something important. This wasn't just about Snowball. This was about proving that people like the Karen sisters couldn't keep trampling others without consequence. Snowball healed quickly from her ordeal. Within days, she was back to running with her siblings, her playful nature shining again. Every time I looked at her, I felt a mix of gratitude and pride. Gratitude that she had been saved before it was too late, and pride that I hadn't let fear silence me. The Karens, on the other hand, weren't so lucky. Their fines were steep, and court forced them to face the embarrassment they had tried to laugh off. Word of their actions spread far beyond the neighborhood. People stopped inviting them to community events, avoided their yard sales, and no longer treated their tantrums as harmless drama. Their reputation was gone, replaced with well-earned disgust. I didn't gloat, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a deep sense of satisfaction. Justice wasn't about revenge, it was about balance, about restoring what was broken. And as I watched Snowball bounce happily in her pen, the balance felt restored. One quiet evening a week later, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, listening to the calm sounds of my animals. The chaos of that awful day already felt like a distant memory, though the lesson it taught me would stay forever. Entitlement might roar loudly, arrogance might gather a crowd, but in the end, the truth has a way of cutting through the noise. I looked at Snowball one last time before heading inside. She lifted her head, her big eyes catching the moonlight, and bleated softly. I smiled. She had no idea how close she'd come to danger, but she trusted me, and that trust was worth more than anything. The Karens had tried to break that trust, to take what wasn't theirs and make it a spectacle. But instead, they'd only exposed themselves. Their party ended in humiliation, their lies unraveled in the face of proof, and their arrogance collapsed under the flashing lights of justice. And me, I walked away with Snowball safe, my dignity intact, and the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting, it's letting the truth do the work. The night ended in silence, the kind of silence that feels earned. The Karens might still live next door, but they were quieter now, subdued, their voices no longer carrying the same confidence. The lesson had been delivered, loud and clear. Snowball was home, justice was served, and for once, peace settled over the neighborhood like a gentle blanket.